Good afternoon, Chris Bury with you on WCPT Chicago Progressive Talk 820. Been sitting in for Joan Esposito, who takes over officially a week from today. 48 degrees, not a bad afternoon at all. We've been talking so much about politics and corruption and Trump and the State of the Union that I think we need to take a little break. And I want to play a little tune here from the mother of the blues, Ma Rainey.
Down in Hogan's Alley, little Miss Nancy Ann, she always hustling and squabbling.
So that is Ma Rainey, my friends, performing in 1930 a song called The Black-Eyed Blues. She was one of the most successful early blues artists with more than 100 recordings, and now she's the featured character in a play that's been around for a while, but it's being performed opening this week at Writers Theater in Glencoe. The play is the August Wilson classic, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. And joining us in the studio is Ron OJ Parson, and you are the director. Welcome.
I am. Thank you. It's good to be here.
And we want to make sure that your microphone is working. How about that?
I can hear it better now.
Okay,
yeah.
I think you are.
It's good to be here.
I'm still new with the button, so that one is on me. So Ron OJ Parson, you're the director of Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. Give us a thumbnail sketch of what this play is about.
Well, really, it's about the blues industry and the recording industry at the time. It takes place in 1927, and Ma Rainey was one of the top blues artists at the time. And actually, the play features one of her musicians. One of her musicians is the trumpet player, who is the younger. He's younger than the rest of the band members, and he's a progressive. This is a progressive station. He's a progressive musician who wants to do a new thing with the music, but Ma is not allowing it. She's not having it. And for a lot of her career, you know, the recording industry actually was very new at this time. So she was, you know, used to being on the road and not wanting to deal with people, you know, because a lot of times people were exploited in the recording industry, and I think still are. That's still going on. But in this day, in 1927, it's basically about her musicians.
Well, let's talk about the title of the play just a little bit, because if you're not familiar with it, you might think that Ma Rainey's Black Bottom is some kind of a disparaging remark, but actually it is named after the Black Bottom is the name of a dance. And here's what the dance sounded like back in the 1920s. And that is the Black Bottom Stomp, performed by Jelly Roll Norton's Red Hot Peppers right here in a Chicago studio in 1926.
Wow.
This is the only one of August Wilson's plays that is set in Chicago.
That's true.
Why
Yeah.
this one?
Well, you know, he went on he went on later he called it the century cycle, where he was writing 10 plays every decade of African American experience in America. And this one was written before he decided to do that. So he was just writing a play, and this one got him out there. And once he became, you know, pretty famous, he said, I'm gonna do plays about my hometown. And so all the rest of them take place in Pittsburgh. I just did another one earlier in the year at the Court Theater called Radial Golf, which was his last play. Each one of them is in different decades. So Gem of the Ocean is the first one, and Radial Golf takes place in the 90s. And this one is in the 20s. So this was early in that progression of the decades.
And you say it's set in a recording studio, and among the dynamics here are the exploitation by the white owner
Right.
of the producing studio,
Right.
the exploitation of
Recording
the
artists.
musicians
Yeah.
and the studio.
And that's
folks.
the thing about Ma Rainey. She was a little different. She tried to have control of what she was doing. So she did try to do that, but of course they still were exploited. But again, as I said, the play is basically about one of her musicians who really gets exploited. He's writing new music, and he wants to record on his own. And but he's part of Ma Rainey's band, so it turns out, without telling too much about the play, it's basically about this young guy.
A lot of people have not heard of Ma Rainey. They've heard of other influential artists, but she was I was just doing a little bit of reading because
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about her.
Yeah, you know.
And she had more than 100 recordings. She was a big, big deal in the 20s.
Right. I think that's probably because the recording industry was such a fledgling thing that people knew. Bessie Smith came out a little bit later, and there was more, the technology was more advanced then, and there was more records being produced. And so she got a lot of the accolades that Ma Rainey didn't get, and Ma Rainey actually taught her. You know, she started early on with Ma Rainey and then went on her own.
And she toured with Louis Armstrong
Yes,
at one point.
yes, and that's before Louis was Louis. You know, so yeah, it was a early time for the industry. So a lot of times, even silent movies and things like that, things were done that we don't know about now today because of technology.
What did August Wilson think about Chicago? As you say, most of his work has been set in his hometown, Pittsburgh. What did he know
August
about Chicago?
He loves Chicago. Most of the plays premiered here at the Goodman. The Goodman had a relationship with August, and actually that was part of my relationship with August. I met him at Yale, as I was saying earlier, when he was just a writer, a resident writer, and a good friend of mine at the time, Charles Dutton, who was the original Levy, was a friend of mine. So I got to go to the first opening night of Ma Rainey's Black Bottom before they were all unknowns. It's hard to see on Broadway now plays without a main celebrity name and this and that. But at the time this came out on Broadway, no one really knew August Wilson that much except in the theater circuit. Charles Dutton hadn't become Rock Dutton, TV show and everything. So it was really rare, but it was just an experience that I was able to have when he was at the Goodman. I was there for a couple of the shows. Jitney, I understudied 3 of the characters because I'm an actor as well, and he was right there and rewriting scenes from that play. So just getting him to watching him work, and but he loved Chicago.
He also loved the blues.
He loved the blues.
And he loved jazz. And he wrote later that the blues and the jazz were one of the creative veins running through him. How does this play use the blues, which is so often called the only real authentic American music form?
Yeah. The music, and he was a poet, so the dialogue is very musical. It's lyrical, and when I do it, I try to put that music into the language. And I think listening to the blues and the jazz and the history, and what I always try to say is to bring in the ancestors of our culture into the plays, and I think that's where you find you can hear the music. And then there's a couple of scenes where we're playing some of those songs like you just played, and it's just it's enlightening to find out what was going on back then. But yeah, he loves Chicago.
There's a scene in the play. It's a monologue from your character Ma Rainey, and she's basically saying, "Look, white folks don't understand the blues," and she has a line that says, "You don't sing to feel better. You sing to understand life." And I found that very striking.
Oh, yeah.
Why is that line so resonant?
Well, that's a good question. I just think basically it's about the spirit. Like she has other things where she says about Ma sings from her heart, from her soul. And I think that's what it is. The music, when August was writing it, he was listening and feeling the spirit of it. That's how I look at it. We say sometimes some people, some cultures may not look at it the same way as the spirit, but that's what it is. That's what the music does to you.
I'd love to hear more about your relationship with August Wilson and what you think of his body of work. We're going to take up those subjects when we come back in just a moment.
Okay.
And good afternoon, Chris Bury back with you on WCPT, Chicago's Progressive Talk. We're taking a needed breather from City Hall corruption and the State of the Union and Trump and all of the political stuff that we talk about all the time. And we are here with Ron OJ Parson, who is director of the August Wilson play, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, which is opening this week at Writers Theater in Glencoe. So welcome back, Ron. And I want you to talk a little bit about, you say you had a relationship with August Wilson. Tell us a little bit about the playwright August Wilson. What kind of a guy was he?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say a relationship, but I did know him and was around some of the efforts of writing the plays. He was just, from my experience with him, he was just a very intelligent, spiritual, talented writer. To me, one of the most prolific and the best writers in American history, no doubt about it, white, black, whatever. What he has done with the century cycle of writing these plays is phenomenal. I mean, one of his plays is done everywhere in the world at some point and so that's something right there. But he was just a great guy to talk to, and very intelligent.
When you look through his body of work, of course, constant theme is race and racism. We're seeing that playing out, even now with the story about the governor of Virginia, Ralph Northam, who had a Facebook, or rather, not a Facebook, a college yearbook photo of two guys, one in blackface, one in a KKK outfit. He may have to resign. We've seen so many of these stories contemporary stories where race is still, right at the surface. August Wilson kind of understood that, right? And he wrote about it.
Yeah, I think the thing about it, though, to me, the plays are about our culture and what we experience. So it's not about that necessarily, but is the world we were in. So you can't help doing those plays without discovering those things about racism and oppression in this country. So yeah, in that sense, he does get, they're somewhat political, but on the other hand, they're very entertaining and very informative about a culture, another culture that you may not understand. Like you said earlier, a lot of people don't even know who Ma Rainey was. But if you look at your history, which a lot of this history was wiped out of the history books, like we weren't even around. So these things are educational and entertaining at the same time, in my opinion. I like to do every story about that, the love that existed. And that's what I say. They're all love stories as far as I'm concerned, because it's about a love of culture, love of family, love of God, love of life, So, I try to touch on those things and some of the other aspects that you'll find, but you can't help, those things are right there.
How did August Wilson's life shape his work? So his father is German, white. His mother is African American. And he has you could call it a tough family life.
Well, yeah, he was just a strong black man. That's all what I can say. Being able to survive and exist in those elements, like I told the story earlier about, not being believed that he was writing a paper in high school, got most of his education in the library, because, that in itself is something that, people didn't trust who we are. So he was able to really survive and exist over that. Poetry. He was a poet, so a lot of artists are able to express themselves in poetry. And I think that was a big thing for him as well. And then his writing, then, the plays that he wrote.
So you're bringing this to the Writers Theater in Glencoe. What is your approach as you're a director? I mean, this play's been done, many times. It was on PBS a couple of years ago. So you're not the first one to tackle this, but
not by any means.
But every director brings his or her own vision to it. What's your vision for this play?
Every director is different, and as I said, for me, trying to bring the spirit in it. The ancestors. I always talk about our ancestors tell us the story. They tell us what to feel, what to say, how to feel, and he was that way too. He'd listen to the voices of the characters. And that's what I try to do. I try to do the same thing that he was doing when he was writing it, to put that into it. And, of course, then when you got talented people like we do have in Chicago here, Felicia Fields is playing Ma, Alfred Wilson, A.C. Smith, David Allen Anderson, Kelvin Roston Jr., Tiffany Renee Johnson. I mean, we've got some top flight people. So in order to do those things, you have to have the right people that can understand what you're trying to express to them as a director.
Chicago, of course, has long been known as a theater town. But outside of Chicago, and maybe even inside Chicago, a lot of people don't understand how pervasive theater is here. And I'm not just talking about the big names. I mean, the Goodman and the Steppenwolf. Yeah. But there's theater all over the city and the suburbs.
This is the greatest theater city in the world, in my opinion. I mean, I lived in New York, and it's different. There's, of course, that's New York. There's theater, there's Broadway, and everything. But I think what we do here in Chicago is just a different animal. For one thing, there's over 250 theaters here, and that's one thing.
That's an amazing number.
That's an amazing number, you know. And granted, some of them are small storefronts and no bigger than this office for rehearsal and things like that. But there are people doing theater, there are people acting, and you know, a lot of them get their feet wet here and go off and do other things, other places. But we're always going to have to be the heart of the theater world for me in Chicago. I didn't discover it till late. I went to the University of Michigan. And my thought was, oh, New York. You got to go to New York or L.A., you know. So I did that for a little while. And then a friend of mine, Alfred Wilson, who was in the play, was working at the Goodman. He was a marketing director there. And he said, hey, man, you know, they got auditions coming up for a play. And I realized, Chicago, man, I got here. I was like, hey, man, this is great. So I stayed, you know, and I've been here ever since. And we started a theater called Onyx, and there were some people that influenced me. So it's just Martha Lavey, Paul Carter Harrison. These are people who, you know, I kind of latched on to, and they helped me really well to immerse myself in the Chicago theater scene.
So you said 250 theaters, which is
more than that, actually.
More than that, which is mind-blowing in and of itself. But the other thing is, so it's accessible because of all those, but it's also, you know, affordable. I was just reading one of the plays I want to see on Broadway is Network, because I love the movie.
It's one of my favorite movies.
And Howard Beale. And I thought, what a perfect adaptation, you know, of a film to see. But
I'm curious to see
but
how
the
that
tickets, man. You know,
they're crazy.
I
right?
mean, it's like minimum 300.
Yeah,
you know,
that's crazy.
and so you know the average person can't afford that.
No,
but you know, here in Chicago, you can see a lot of first-rate theater
really
at a
can.
reasonable price.
You really can. And a lot of times there's an industry night or there's a pay what you can night or, you know, a night where we invite people. You know, I'm basically based at Core Theater in Hyde Park, and we do that too for the community so they can come in and see the plays when they normally wouldn't be able to see an August Wilson play or some Shakespeare or whatever. So that's a great thing too. So it's accessible, and that's the thing about Chicago. Theater is accessible to anybody that wants to see it. There is a way to see it.
And is Chicago still considered kind of a feeder into New York and L.A.? I mean, sort
Definitely.
of a training ground, if
No
you
doubt.
will, or maybe that's, I don't want to be disparaging, but I mean, is it like, okay, you come to Chicago, famously Second City, and from there,
Yeah.
you can build up your portfolio
sure.
and go on?
For sure. A lot of times, you know, there isn't a respect. I've directed in New York and I've acted in L.A. and did some things and actually held some auditions in L.A. one time. And there's just a respect that a Chicago actor or director has immediately in those environments. Doing TV, I've done, you know, a few little TV shows here and there. And every time I notice that the Chicago actors get the respect because we come in prepared. We have our lines and we know we're going to stand, you know. So all of those things come from the training that we get in Chicago. Some of the best schools are here and people, that's how a lot of these theaters start because the young people get out of school and then they say, let's start a theater. Then they end up staying here because it's like it's working so well for them.
And we're talking about theater, but comedy is kind of a parallel universe, and we not only have Second City, but we have I.O. and Prov Olympics and all these other places, Lincoln Lodge.
It's a lot.
I mean, it's really a rich
a lot going on.
Cultural environment in comedy and in theater.
And actually, sometimes an actor will find they don't know they're comedic, and they'll get an opportunity to do some Second City or improv, and they say, oh, I like this, you know, and then they can do it all. You know, there's a voiceover market here. There's more TV shows done here now, film. So it's a great place to be.
Well, tell us a little bit about the Writers Theater in Glencoe. What kind of a venue is it? And is it the kind of intimate venue that makes a play like this, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, more accessible to the audience?
I love intimate theater. You know, I'm going to be doing something at the Goodman Sweat, which is a big theater, and those are good to work at sometimes too. But the intimacy of a place like Writers, which started as a 50-seat bookstore, it was in the back of a bookstore, 50 seats, and I did one of my shows there called The Caretaker by Harold Pinter, and it made it so different because you're so inside the play. So, yeah, Writers has been around. I'm not sure how long, but it's been quite a while. But the theater now is a new theater. I think this is like their third season, and it's built from ground up. There's two spaces there, and it's again very accessible because it's right on the Metro line. So a lot of people say Glencoe, I'm not going way up there, but then you can get right on the train and find the train after and go on home. So it's just one of the top theaters in the city, no doubt. Do very quality work. Our artistic director, Michael Halberstam, is always looking for the writer's point of view and the best writers that we can get up there. And so it's just a great place to work.
And who is the star of the show? Is it Ma Rainey? Is that the star of the show?
It's an ensemble piece. Like I said before, there's one of the band members is the one that's pushing the story forward. His name is Levy. And it's about him, but it's Ma Rainey, of course, because it's her band. So, and when it first came out, people were like, I didn't see Ma Rainey as much as I. But again, it's a story, like you said earlier, about the culture and about different emotions and passions. And like I say, I like to say it's about love.
We've been talking with Ron OJ Parson. He's director of the August Wilson Classic, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. And it opens this week at Writers Theater in Glencoe. And best of luck to you in this production. I hope it's a screaming success.
Well,
for
thank you. I'm at www.ronojparson.com if you want to check out what I'm doing in the future.
Excellent. We'll be right back after this. Thank you.
Thank you.